Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular council meeting for Monday, April the 3rd, 2017. Our clerk today will be Ms. Sheila Gurry. I would first off like to acknowledge that we hold this meeting on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nations. Ms. Gurry, any additional late items?
Well, I was going to say that no, there wasn't any late items, but there actually is a late item. It's a piece of correspondence that is just in front of you right now that was past the addendum date, and it's just with respect to OCP 82 RA 371, the Breckin Hill Community Association. So that is in front of you and will be added as a supplemental item on the website tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kipp.
You would request, Your Worship, through you to Councillor Kipp, you would add that right now for us.
Thank you.
And Your Worship, sorry to, I remember now that Councillor Beswick also had a late item, I believe.
Yes, he's chimed in.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. I'd like to add a late delegation for an item not related to the agenda. Mr. Ode Siri with the Nanaimo Marina Association.
Thank you.
Where would that fall under the agenda, please?
I believe that would go under number 13, other business, if council so chooses.
Is there any opportunity to bring it forward under presentations?
Could request that, and if it's council's pleasure, then yes, you could do so.
That would be my request, please.
Okay, so there's another one. I would like to put forward a request for travel expenses under the policy council expense policy. That could be under other business as well. Okay. Any other? Seeing Councillor Beswick.
Just clarification, please, on where the delegation will fall on the agenda, please, Ms. Curry.
Thank you, Worship. Through you to Councillor Beswick. The motion, as I understand it, was for Mr. Surrey to be added and now as under presentations. So if council approves the agenda as amended, he would show up under presentations now.
Okay. Call a question. Motion for the adoption. Motion for the adoption of the agenda as amended. Moved by Councillor Beswick, seconded by Councillor Brennan. Discussion. Seeing none, call a question. All those in favor. Opposed. Motion carries. We now need a motion for the adoption of the minutes for the February 20th meeting. Councillor Yoakum, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Hong. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item is presentations. And we have one presentation from Mr. Ode Siri.
Good evening, Your Worship. Good evening, Council. Thank you very much for allowing us the time as a late delegation. I'd just like to identify some of the members that are within the Nanaimo Marina Association that have joined us tonight, that are in the audience and in the gallery, from various owners from other marina operations, as well as the Nanaimo Yacht Club, as well as members from the forestry industry who are also been part of our alliance throughout this process. So they are all here this evening, and if you have any questions specific to them, they'd be more than happy to answer any questions from you. What we'd like to start with is to see from our last discussion on Monday, we did give a presentation to follow up on the months that had passed since our other presentations as well. And we understood that there was going to be a presentation in camera provided by the Nanaimo Port Authority to, I would imagine, discuss what we had been discussing. Now, that was in camera. We don't have that. We do not have that information. It wasn't privy to us, obviously. But in the course of our presentation to you that night, some of the councillors had suggested this was an opportunity to give the Port Authority one more opportunity or one more chance to have something to say about the crisis that they created. And so I'd like to just have a follow-up on that discussion to see where we are in the course of that and how we can move forward now pertaining to the Society of the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association.
Thank you, Mr. Suri. Is there any questions for our delegation? I don't see any
I got a
questions.
quick question.
Thank you. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you, Mr. Suri, for coming forward. I wanted to ask this question last Monday when you were talking about your the membership, and yeah, our presentation was in the open, was it not, last week?
Our presentation.
Okay,
was
so I
open.
can speak loosely on it, not loosely, but when you're talking about support from the forest industry, the stakeholders, I see my brother Doug in the crowd. I don't know if I should know this, but it's sort of key. Is SFN in favor of this collaborative approach that the society's attempting to take?
So we've been in discussions with Nanaimo First Nation on this matter. They're here as an observer tonight, and we continue those discussions with them. Okay. Obviously, that will be an announcement that they'll make themselves when they're ready.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
we have been having a considerable amount of consultations and engagement with the SFN.
But in a collaborative, open relationship.
Yes, absolutely.
Great. Thank you.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Mr. Siri. Just one quick thing. The boat show this weekend, I heard it was phenomenal. I didn't get a chance to go, but what a wonderful event for the harbor and the people there. It's quite active, and a lot of people went through, so a good event. I just want to talk about, do you think there's a time where we could sit down with the City of Nanaimo, the Port Authority, and yourselves? Because I'm finding between the different organizations, we're getting all these different timings, not hearing people in the room, not being able to answer the question about the question. Do you think it would be fruitful to sit down in the room, all three parties together, and talk?
We never say no to dialogue, but at the same time, we have to acknowledge that this has been 5 years. And I do have to recall our last meeting when we were there a week ago. And I'm sorry, Mr. Vin, not to put you on the spot, but one of the comments that was made by staff at that meeting was, we're going to give the port one more opportunity. And when we had asked, why can't we do this publicly? We've only been asking for public discussions and dialogue on this matter. And for some reason, the Port Authority has an inability to do this publicly. They refrain from being open and honest about these issues. So I'm not sure how we move forward. And when we did leave that meeting, and when we were told at the time that not all the port's representatives were available to meet publicly last week, we walked out of that meeting, and there was the chair of the board of directors, there was the CEO, there was the manager of property, there were 2 other board of directors, plus a consultant, all representing the port's interests. So that appeared to us to be the senior leadership team, and plus whatever experts that they had on hand to be part of a discussion. Why couldn't they have done that publicly? So to answer your question, is there room for dialogue? Absolutely, but I think that time has passed with this organization, the port as it operates today.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Councillor Brennan.
Siri, following on from that, then, do you, well, let's just set this up a little bit. I'm reluctant to make a decision of this import without a report from our staff. Do you see value in City Council requesting a written report from our staff on the transfer of responsibility from the NPA to the Nanaimo Marine Association?
So just to clarify, it's not a transfer to the Nanaimo Marine Association, it's to transfer the stewardship to the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association.
Okay.
A totally different distinction.
Okay.
The Greater Nanaimo Waterfront.
GNW,
A.
Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association.
The
Thank you.
GNWA
Yeah.
is the acronym.
Yeah.
It is really a model of the Victoria operation, the Victoria
Yes.
Society, which is
Yeah.
the Greater Victoria Harbour Authority. They just happen to have the word authority in their
Yeah.
Name. It's not really an authority in that sense. It's an association. It is a society.
Right.
So we followed that model.
Yeah.
And yes, we can have the whole purpose of discussing this is to move this issue forward,
Right.
so that we can have more
Yeah.
discussions with staff. But it has to go to the federal level at this point. So the collaborative process that we are
Yeah.
discussing is to have that openly, have that publicly, but with the Minister of Transport and the Deputy Minister to say, okay, we as a community are united. As we discussed last year, this is from north to south, Duke Point to Departure Bay. All industries that do business on the harbor are united in this approach with this model. So what we're saying, let's move it forward. And we need the city to be united behind this model with us.
And that's where I would want to have our staff's assistance or their recommendations with regard to this. I really think that, I don't know about anybody else, but I don't think that I have the specific competency to make this decision without resorting to asking our staff for recommendations and advice.
So just on that point,
Yeah.
it's a very important point. We have to remember the question that we're discussing now is the creation of this entity. It doesn't automatically become the steward. This is a very long process.
Yes,
We're
yes.
talking months, years,
Yeah.
but we have to set the groundwork. The groundwork has been laid by the example given to us in Victoria. There's other communities,
Mm-hmm.
but we're using the one that's on the island. We're using that as the example to press this forward. So to have that consultation with staff and to move forward with the City of Nanaimo and SFN and industry, we need to have the groundwork. The groundwork has been created, so do you believe in the groundwork to move forward so that we can begin the process, which will be a very, very long process?
And I get that it would be a long process, and that's why I'm hoping that we could take just some little extra time at this point to be advised by our staff about the implications of this and what it might mean for the city. I mean, you have to understand from my point of view, we're talking about probably the most highly valued piece of Nanaimo is that waterfront.
Absolutely, and
Yeah,
it goes
and-
from a private entity, which
Yeah.
is the Port Authority,
I get
to
that.
a public entity.
Well, actually, I'm not sure that we would necessarily agree that the NPA isn't a public entity. It may be that the authority was transferred to them, but they are still expected to take the public interest in when they're making decisions. That would be
And
my
that's-
expectation.
No, I agree.
yeah.
They are supposed to do
Yeah.
that, and that's where there's a gross
And this is
misinterpretation.
what I want. This is what I want some input from our staff on how well they're doing that. What would be the implications of a new entity taking that over? And I would expect them to be able to give me advice on that. I mean, we hire them in order to get that kind of advice. So I just want you to know that I'm not saying no or yes on this. I'm saying, look, my area of competency is not this, but I expect our staff to bring forward that kind of competency and give me advice on it.
So if I could,
I'm sorry.
yeah, if I could, can we restrict our
Yeah.
interaction with the delegation to questions
Yes.
to the delegation?
Kind of was, but
Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Suri. How many organizations and businesses and roughly is represented in this presentation?
So the Nanaimo Marina Association represents the marinas along Newcastle Channel. So that is I've done it in the presentation. I think it's 9 marinas in total. Might be 8. One of them there's been an amalgamation of properties. So we represent the marinas. However, we have strategic alliances we formed with other industries that do operate on the waterfront. So those industries are in retail, in the forestry businesses, the seaplane terminals, the terminal operators themselves. So we have a vast alliance group, a group of companies that are have the same interests that we have. And to be perfectly frank, they all suffered the same fate that we did, starting in 2012 when the port did what it did. So our alliances are strong, and we've had significant consultations and engagement with SFN during this time as well.
Thank you. The genesis of this has been the result of the lease increase in taxes from the Port Authority. And so you've been at this, you indicated, since 2012, but in earnest, coming to see us as a council and staff in and out of camera for how long?
We started in November of 2016, and that was the rationale behind that was that the port at the time in November had told us that the rules that they have to live by and operate within were directed by Minister of Transport Marc Garneau. Now, we took that at face value, and that's where we came to City Council in November and said, we need as much support from the community to write a letter, to write emails and send correspondence to the minister to say that the way that he's directed the Port Authority to operate is unfair. And so that letter was provided by council to the minister, and we went forward. However, the discussions that were supposed to unfold between the Port Authority of Nanaimo and the minister and the Deputy Minister of Transport Canada never occurred. Those meetings, we now learned, were the suggestion that was going to happen was disingenuous. It was dishonest. And so it was a waste of time, unfortunately, for council to write that letter, because as the Canada Marine Act states, and as is written in the letter's patent of the Port Authority of Nanaimo, the Port Authority has the jurisdiction to make day-to-day operations by themselves. They are an arm's length entity from Transport Canada. They are supposed to operate like a business, but at arm's length from government. The challenge we have is that one day they're a business, one day they're a government. They keep jumping between the two.
Thank you. Final comment and question is, last Monday there was a motion to support the efforts, which to my understanding would have laid the ground rules, would have laid the foundation with your organization, your coalition, regional district, Nanaimo First Nation city, et cetera, to approach Transport Canada with the understanding that the city wishes for the organization to move forward on potential of a new operation, so to speak, but considerable amount of work and undertakings would be required.
It's not exactly a new operation, but the creation of a new governance model. And that's what we're talking about. New governing model that would be used in Nanaimo that would follow the model of Victoria.
So I don't have any more questions for the delegation, but I do for our staff.
Thank you. You can come back in the queue after the other ones are finished. Councillor Thorpe, questions for the delegation?
I have a comment, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Siri. Appreciate your presentations, as always. I just need to, I think, repeat quickly what I stated Monday night, and that is that I, first of all, have sympathy with your concerns about fairness and equity over lease rates, and I understand your concerns. But I have to also agree with Councillor Brennan that I'm not prepared to make a motion or, in fact, give us support one way or the other tonight on the fly until I hear from our staff, because our city's relationship with the present Port Authority is much more complicated than simply marina rates, a number of other important projects pending, and I need to know the implications of any actions that we might take tonight on those other projects. So I hope you understand and appreciate that. I'm not saying I disagree with you, but I need more information from our staff first.
I appreciate your comments, Councillor, and I just want to remind everyone in Council and also in the gallery and anyone watching that this is much larger than just a rate issue. This is speaking to the very nature of the kind of harbour governing model we want to have in this community. Yeah, did the rates start this whole thing off? Yeah, absolutely they did, because businesses aren't viable. The economic situation on the waterfront is not viable if this continues like this, and we're seeing it already. The decay that we've seen here is substantial compared to other harbour jurisdictions. So this is much bigger issue than just a rate issue. When we talk about the relationship with the port that the city has, we've asked this question before, but do you feel it's a healthy relationship in light of the kind of for the past 50 years or even in the past 7 years? Has it been a healthy relationship for the city of Nanaimo with the way the port's been operating?
And I'll answer the same way I answered last Monday night, Mr. Siri. Whether any individual sees it as healthy or otherwise, it's a very significant and important relationship, and one which we have to examine very, very closely before we make a change to it.
Agreed, and that's really speaks to the point of projects you were discussing as well. There are a number of projects that are important and that happen on the harbor, and there are a number of projects that are not happening on the harbor for the sole reason because of the port and how it operates. And it is an institution, it's a body that is not working in the public's interest. It's not working in the interest of economic development either. And we have many examples of that where we can quantify the amount of dollars that are not being invested in Nanaimo because of the port's actions. And some of those members of the audience here tonight are those representatives. And they can speak to you in person about how much money they would have invested by now, how much business they would be doing in Nanaimo by now had the port not been as manipulative and dishonest with this group at large. And that's really, the community in the whole loses because of this. So when we hear you 100% on these issues. There's a number of issues that need to be discussed, but they can be focused very quickly on the root cause of the problem, and the common denominator in every single one of these issues and challenges and problems is that the port created them all.
Thank you very much. Motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kipp. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Councillor Bestwick.
Just a question to staff. Ms. Gurry, in terms of motions, when is it appropriate to make a motion in relation to the presentation?
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Bestwick, right now would be appropriate if you wish to make a motion regarding the presentation.
Motion to, is there a motion coming from the floor?
Yes. Yeah, I have. So this motion is the same motion that was made last Monday that was withdrawn in order to hear the second delegation on the subject matter, which did occur in camera. And so the motion is that Council support the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association's efforts to work with Nanaimo First Nation, the City of Nanaimo, the Regional District of Nanaimo, the marine industry, and the community at large to form a not-for-profit society tasked with becoming the official steward of Nanaimo's water lot.
So it's been moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Kipp. Discussion. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. I've heard this conversation numerous times now in camera and out in the public. I will be supporting this motion for the simple fact is we run the risk, and it runs the risk of our shorelines, our waterfront that belongs to the people of Nanaimo getting out of the hands of the people of Nanaimo. So I look forward to this waterfront, the marinas being governed by the people of Nanaimo, for the citizens of Nanaimo for years to come, and I fear the risk of privatization, which nearly happened numerous years ago. And I view this, if they get to the level of the federal powers, sort of went through this numerous years ago with the First Nations Health, when Health Canada transferred the health authority over to First Nations people, and all the Health Canada people were like, oh my God, we can't have that. We can't have the First Nations running health. Well, you know what, folks? The First Nations are running their health authority. They're coming along and doing a great job. And many of those people along the Health Council, I just want to do the parallels because these people, there will be expertise in Port Authority that may be needed down the road in this field. So I definitely want to support this and keep making sure the shorelines stay with the people of Nanaimo for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hong.
Thank you. I think the presenter made a good point that this is going to be a really, really long process. I don't think this is going to happen overnight. I can support the motion, but there's a whole bunch of other things that we really need to consider and look at. Public input, I think, is one thing. Getting the feedback from our public to see what they think. So a couple of open houses or e-town halls are probably in order. I don't have a problem with being involved in forming a committee. I don't think this is to overthrow anybody. It's clarification. If the federal government is interested in getting out of the harbor business, we should jump on it. I think it's good timing if they don't want to be involved. If we hear from them otherwise to say that they are involved and they're not going to give this up easily unless we try to overthrow the Port Authority, then I think we should reconsider our position. But I'm hoping at this point that there's going to be some clarification on the steps that the staff are going to do to make sure to protect the city before we do anything that is rash. So I just wanted a question through you to staff with regards to what they could see coming forward that we should do before we join or be part of a society.
Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the response that staff will give you is probably going to be very disappointing, because the truth of the matter that the issue is complex. There's jurisdictional issues to be dealt with, and it's true it's a long process. What we'll probably do, depending on where you go with your motion, is we will need resources to be able to advise you. Even if we were to call for open houses, we as it sits now, don't know what we'll be telling members of the public, because we don't know what's possible and what's not possible, what can you do and what you cannot do. So there is some work to be done on the city side to understand. Obviously, the presenter has been on this for a while, and I think NPA has been on this for a while, but the city hasn't. And the city is being asked to take a position, but it's a position of ignorance from staff's perspective. So we would not be immediately saying do X or Y. I think there's a little bit of study that the city needs to do, and we don't have those resources on staff to be able to advise you on this file.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. I cannot support the motion as it stands for the reasons that I stated earlier. I'm not prepared to take an important first step on a very important initiative on the basis of 15 minutes discussion tonight. And I know that we have heard from both parties before, but I still feel very strongly that I need a discussion with our city staff about the ramifications of this first step and where it might lead us. And I'm not prepared to rush into a decision tonight. Again, I'm not saying I wouldn't support something in the future, but I need more information first. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
And I don't see this as rushing into something. This is something we've had in front of us a number of times. Mr. Siri has presented to us a number of times on this. It is a long process, and it's going to take time to accomplish it. It's a process of partnerships as well, and all of those partners are going to have to give input, and our input will come from our city staff. And when we need that input, I fully expect our staff will have it for us. We've got some great staff. They can figure these things out. But if we keep putting this off, it doesn't happen. And I think it needs to happen. It needs to happen now. And so I'm going to support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Bennett.
Thank you. Could I have that motion put up? Is that possible? No? Can you read it then again? Because I'm not really clear whether this motion says holus vosus, let's get involved in this and support it, or if it says let's get some information before we do that.
Would you like me to read it, Your Worship?
Please.
That council support the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association's efforts to work with Snuneymuxw First Nation, the City of Nanaimo, the Regional District of Nanaimo, the marine industry, and the community at large to form a not-for-profit society tasked with becoming the official steward of Nanaimo's water lot properties.
Okay, thank you. So what it says is that it's asking us to support the City of Nanaimo in the formation of the nonprofit society. You know, if I take everything else away, that's what it says. Support the City of Nanaimo.
Your Worship, through you to Councillor Brennan, it is that council support the Greater Nanaimo Association's efforts
Yes.
to take everything else away, to form a not-for-profit society tasked with becoming the official steward of Nanaimo's water
And that
lot
part of that
properties.
nonprofit society is the City of Nanaimo? Can I look at it?
Yes, you certainly can.
Thank you. Okay, so it says that council support the efforts, that council support efforts, no,
Reading it right.
I am. The council support the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association's efforts. One could also delete that and say, council supports efforts to form a not-for-profit society tasked with becoming the official steward of Nanaimo's water lot properties. That's what it says. Support efforts to create a nonprofit society to become the official. So it really doesn't introduce an opportunity for council to have our staff provide advice and recommendations to us on the issue of supporting the movement towards a nonprofit society to govern the waterfront. Ultimately, I that may well be the position that I take, but I think I really strongly believe I have an obligation to the people of Nanaimo to call upon our staff to advise us about what this means for the City of Nanaimo and its residents and what happens on our waterfront. And it's not that I disagree in the end for that to happen. I'm like Councillor Thorpe, but I really want, because this is a significant decision that will impact the city and our waterfront forever. So I want to know from our staff, what are the implications of this for us and for the people of Nanaimo? That's why I just can't support it. And I would be happy to support a motion that said, let's explore this, let's have our staff explore it with the GNWA, have discussions with the Port Authority and the other marinas. I mean, this is a big task. And Mr. Mem is right. It's a big task. We don't have the staff right now to do it, so we'll have to put some money into it. But if we're going to change our relationship with the waterfront, we need to take our time and get all the information we can. So at this point, I can't support it.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Just a few comments and then thoughts. This is the motion as it reads is to support the Greater Nanaimo Waterfront Association to work with, in other words, to collaborate with the city, the regional district, Snuneymuxw, the marine industry, and the community at large. And so it's a process that needs to be undertaken and started somewhere that will include and have the endorsement or not of our staff moving forward. Because if we don't start the discussions with all of the parties named in a collaborative effort to determine or define whether or not there is an appetite for the port operation to have a different governance model, then we're going to find that information out through all of the agencies and the stakeholders through these meetings that will have to be established and set up, with or without how many allocated or assigned staff people. We're being asked to support, the motion is asking us to support the Greater Nanaimo Water Association, which is a coalition, and not one or two or half a dozen, it's multiples, to work toward, and it may be unsuccessful. At the end of the day, they're asking for us to support the initiative, to get all of these groups together to see if there is a model, a governance model that is more potentially appropriate vis-a-vis the Greater Victoria Harbour Association that has undertaken a very successful transition from where they were to where they are. And it's extremely similar. And I know that the Nanaimo model will, of course, can't be a one-size-fits-all, but assumedly, once we get all of these organizations together and working toward a goal and objective that may or may not be realized, we're going to find that out. If we postpone and procrastinate, and because I do believe that there's some time sensitivity, and I do believe that Transport Canada is looking at what they're doing with their ports and their airports, and that if we don't get ahead of this curve, if we don't get ahead of this, then there may not be an opportunity to entertain this. And this isn't a coup, this isn't an overthrowing of a government, whatever. This is to try to determine whether or not it's in the greater good and interests, and we'll determine that. And our staff will participate and have a role in that determination moving forward. So we have to start somewhere. It's complex, of course. And anytime something like this, it's always big, and it's always bigger than us, and it's much bigger than us. But we have to start somewhere with the dialogue and the consultation and getting people in the same room to discuss the future. And that's what this is, discussing the future. And it may remain status quo, and it may not. But if we don't get going, I can see us not addressing this in a timely manner, and it will be lost upon us, the opportunity. And I think it's an opportunity that we have to entertain. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Brennan.
Thank you, Your Worship. If the wording were explore, can I have it again? If it were to explore the efforts, then I could probably support that, because that's a much different word than support, because once you use the support, you're already on that side of the question. You're already supporting a change. Explore a change in consultation and collaboration with all the other partners. Fair enough. Go ahead. Explore it. But if it's to determine it, that's where you use the word support. So with regard to how much time we have, this is the federal government. We have time. We particularly have time to consult with our staff. That's not postponing, that's not procrastinating, that's doing what I see my role as a city councillor is to request information from our professional staff, or that they pursue professionals to give us advice. So, I would make a motion to, amend this motion. Would move that it read that council explore efforts to work with Snuneymuxw, and I would take City of Nanaimo off there, actually, just delete it, because if we're involved in exploring it, we're there at the table anyway. The Regional District of Nanaimo, the marine industry, and the community at large to form, so it would be to explore efforts. I'm not sure to form, because that's pretty directive, to inquire about a not-for-profit society tasked with becoming the official steward of Nanaimo's water lot properties. So it's more of a request to explore the issue with those partners. You don't need to have the City of Nanaimo if you've already got the council doing it. That's the only thing that I would support, would be something that was less directive and more exploratory.
Okay, so I would suggest that we call the question defeat this motion, if that's where you want to go, if
Okay.
it's defeated, because you're asking for some pretty significant changes, I think, to the...
Okay.
Would you agree, Ms. Gray?
Yes, thank you, Worship, but I also just came to me that one of the prior times Mr. Surrey came and spoke with us, though it was in camera, there was a motion on the floor to staff to explore and report back, which hasn't been done yet. So there is that motion that's already existing, and I was just trying to find it. I haven't yet, but I do recall when I was looking into this matter a little bit last week that there was a motion already on the floor with respect to that too. So I just wanted to bring it to Council's attention.
Thank you. So if we could, Councillor Yoakum next.
Thank you. Just quickly, I want to state and be a little bit repetitive, but I see this as we're being responsive to a broad group of interests to see if we can create a better option together. But for the benefit of the public. If we are the Harbour City, which we are, I don't accept the idea that our staff is ignorant of the fact of these issues. We have heard enough concern and seen enough inaction. It's time to take this initiative to safeguard the public interest in our harbour and ensure it stays in hands of the people of Nanaimo. And this model puts in more hands of the people of Nanaimo than the present-day governance model, than I think Councillor Bestwick 6 or so. So I definitely support this model, and it works in Victoria. It has way more people involved in the initiative of all stakeholders and the experts of the subject matter at hand. So I definitely will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Worship. There is a motion in the books to explore this, and the challenge that we have as staff, we've talked about this offline as staff, is the complexities involved. The CAO has reached out to a number of resources to try and have a sense of how this could go. And whatever resolution you make, we would be asking for funding to actually do this piece, whether it's exploring whatever the implications would be. Our role is not to sway you to be for one side or the other, is to provide you with the implications of this. And like I said, we are not in any way in a position to provide you that. There's passionate arguments for, there's passionate arguments against, but at this point, we would not be in a position to advise you.
So just prior to calling the question, I just wanted to say that I disagree with Councillor Hong's assertion that this is not to overthrow the Nanaimo Port Authority. I believe it really truly is. It's just the start. We're being asked to be a stakeholder in an organization of which we've never met the other partners. We've never sat down with the other partners. I want to know what Transport Canada's position is on the development of airports and ports. We've asked our staff to write to Transport Canada to find out what the minister's and the government's proposal is, or what their intentions are with respect to development of airports and ports. And we need to have a fulsome discussion on the subject with the other stakeholders. I've heard forest industry, I've heard marine transportation, I've heard a number of other stakeholders, most of who do not occupy federal leases. They occupy provincial leases. And that also begs the question is, where is the provincial government in this? There's only a handful of federal leases in Nanaimo. The balance of them are provincial. So we need to find out where they are as well. So I can't support it. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillors Brennan, Mayor McKay and Councillor Thorpe. Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Mayor's report. So today I had the pleasure of attending a press conference this morning presented by the Nanaimo Clippers ownership group. They revealed to the community that since their earlier press conference held on March 16, 2017, a number of parties have come forward and have committed to making individual investment in a new ownership model. It was laid out today that it's the intent of the ownership group to establish a non-profit society to be known as the Nanaimo Clippers Hockey Society, which will ultimately assume ownership of the Nanaimo Clippers. The significant investors may be provided with debentures, and the balance of the funding to purchase the team will come from additional business community members, smaller investors, and individuals made up of citizens. As a result of this true team effort, the Nanaimo Clippers will continue operating in the city of Nanaimo. This is only the first step. Lease negotiations with the city must be completed. Additional funding will have to be sought and secured. The Clippers will only reach long-term stability within the city with additional contributions to the Clippers Hockey Society, a substantial increase in fan support, corporate support, and ticket sales. I'm confident the management group will continue to work hard to achieve the goals of establishing a new model for success for this important part of the social and cultural fabric of the city of Nanaimo. Thanks to all those who have worked so hard over the past 2 weeks to make today's announcement a reality. Thank you. Next item, administration, number 7A, delegation of authority under the property maintenance bylaw, number 2017, number 7240, and the purpose is to delegate the power to enforce and the property maintenance bylaw to the manager of bylaw, regulation, and security, or their designate.
I would so move that the delegation of authority, property maintenance bylaw 2017, number 7240, to allow the manager of bylaw, regulation, and security to enforce the provisions of the property maintenance bylaw pass first reading.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion. Councillor Kemp.
Thank you. I'm just wondering about the ability for a person to appeal. I hope, like I say, can I have an explanation on the appeal process through staff?
Mr. Davison.
Your Worship, through you to your council, the appeal process would be once we have determined that a property is in violation of the bylaw, they would have a 14-day period once they receive a letter from the city informing them of the violation to contact the city, whereupon they would be then scheduled for the next regularly scheduled council meeting to present to council.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, okay, that's enough for now.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question then. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
Property maintenance bylaw 2017, number 7240, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
I would so move that delegation of authority, property maintenance bylaw 2017, number 7240, pass third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you very much. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next item. Under Corporate Services, Heritage Facade Grant for 101 Commercial Street. And the purpose is to obtain council approval for the Heritage Facade Grant for the Ashlar Lodge Masonic Temple at 101 Commercial Street. There is a recommendation on page 19. Moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Brennan. Thank you. Discussion. I don't see anybody there. Just a second. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Just a comment that the 10,000 is the maximum, but it's been increased for those that don't know to 14 and change because the property itself or the bill is on three different faces three different streets fronts. So that is sort of the explanation for that. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Hong.
Thank you. Just with regards to these projects and these facade grants, were they coming before now the finance and audit before they come here, or are we bypassing that, or what was the process? I'm just curious.
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Both of these applications recently appeared before the Finance and Audit Committee and were supported by the committee, and those recommendations are included within your reports this evening.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Mr. Lindsay's comments, I just wanted to state that going forward, the Finance and Audit minutes will be received by Council with the following recommendations. So therefore, the reports won't need to be, it won't be redundant and you won't get the reports 2 times. If they've been passed at a Finance and Audit meeting, as well as any other committee meetings, you'll still be approving the motions, but it'll just be the motions and not the actual reports duplicated for a second time.
So I'm going to call a question, then I'm going to come back to you, Ms. Curry. So the call a question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Ms. Curry, you're going to be doing that with all committees. Am I correct? Okay. So council needs to be aware that you're going to receive all of the agendas and all of the minutes of all of the committees. So you must be diligent and review all of those minutes and agendas, and you will then have recommendations that come out of them. So you will not, because you will no longer be receiving reports at council.
And Your Worship, just one more thing to add to that each committee's chair is a member of council, so the chair will be here to speak to those recommendations as well when they come before council.
Yep. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. I think it's a really important point for the community to know that this is a derivative of the new committee structure, setup, environment, and an effort to expedite these meetings so that they aren't laden with debate and discussion and more debate and more discussion, that at the committee level, the majority of council members participating will have this information. And then if you aren't participating in those meetings, as the mayor said, it's your role and responsibility to ensure that you are familiarizing yourself with what took place at those committee meetings so we can get here and decisions can be made reasonably swiftly. And the Finance Policy Committee is a committee of the entire council. So it's not as though that anybody's missing anything that takes place at the finance meetings. Thank you.
Okay. So the next item, Heritage Home Grant Application at 45 Milton Street. And the purpose is to obtain council approval for the Heritage Home Grant for the Young Partager residents at 45 Milton Street. There's a recommendation on page 28. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hong. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is Covenant Amendment Application number CA5 at 4951 Jordan Avenue. And the purpose is to present council with an application to amend the Section 219 covenant registered on the title at 4951 Jordan Avenue in order to remove use restrictions and requirements for lot consolidation and landscaping. There's a recommendation on page 36.
Move the staff recommendation.
Moved by Councillor Thorpe and seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one is the development permit number 1020 at 3100 Hammond Bay Road. And the purpose is to present for council's consideration a development permit application to allow for the reduction in the watercourse setback in order to allow renovations and the construction of an open deck to an existing single residential dwelling and to legalize an existing accessory building within the watercourse setback area at 3100 Hammond Bay Road. Recommendation on page 51. Can we get somebody to move the recommendation to get on the floor? Or something else. Moved by Councillor Kipp. Thank you. Seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Discussion. Councillor Brennan.
Thank you. My screen just disappeared. So I'm happy, I'm satisfied with the remediation piece of this to strengthen the shoreline and vegetate it with natural. But I'm not in favor of allowing the deck to go out any farther. I think that it's important that we stick with our riparian area rules, regulations, and so for that reason, I don't know, I just went off my screen. Can we divide it into two? Can we approve one and then call the question on the other? Somebody help me with that.
So you're
what
asking-
page is it on? 151? The Departure Bay. I think that the Departure Bay Neighborhood Association said it right for me, and that was that the erosion control aspect is low impact. It will prevent further shoreline erosion and protection of the archaeological features present too, and that was really important. But the extension of the lower deck further into the riparian area is a concern I have, and I won't support that.
Thank you. Ms. Gurry.
Thank you, Worship. We are on D, correct? The 3100 Hammond Bay Road?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I believe there is just the one,
Are they both covered in the same application? So we can't address the two issues in the application? We have to accept or deny the application itself?
Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. The way the motion is currently crafted, if that was adopted, it would be approving all aspects of the application. Council could take it upon themselves to amend the recommended motion and make it specific to one or more parts of the application, certainly.
Okay.
What's the pleasure of the movers and the seconder? Leave it intact or make an amendment? Councillor Thorpe? Okay, pardon. Who moved it, Ms. Gurry?
I second it.
it was moved by Councillor Kipp and seconded by Councillor Hong.
Okay. Correct.
Oh, I think Mr. Lindsay could maybe help us with the wording if we wanted to approve one and not the other.
Motion simply to approve would just be to permit the reduce the watercourse setback as measured from the natural boundary from 15 meters to 6.5 meters, not including the proposed deck extension. If
Can I
that
ask
motion.
a question?
Go
Can I
ahead.
ask Dale a question? Dale, the reducing the watercourse setback from 15 to 6.5 is to permit the deck, is it not? No?
It's to do multiple things, Your Worship. It's to allow for that deck extension, which is actually 7.5 meters away, but it's also to legalize the siting of the existing house and the detached garage.
So if we passed a motion that says to reduce the watercourse setback to 6.5, could the proponent still build the deck inside of that? Because that's what I'm trying to not approve.
If you look at your diagram on page 58, Councillor,
Okay.
it pretty much covers that. There would be no deck and half of the house would still be inside the setback.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with approving the house because it's already there, but I don't want to add to that. So I just want
If I understand the report, it's to repair the deck. This is how this all came about. They went to replace the deck, and of course, this whole thing was triggered because of replacing of an existing deck. Am I correct, Mr. Lindsay?
There's two elements. There's actually the repair of an existing deck and the potential extension of an at-grade patio or deck separately.
Yeah.
So if the motion was to reduce the setback to 6.5, not including the proposed deck, you would then be legalizing the siting of the garage, you'd be legalizing the siting of the house, and the upper deck, it would just specifically not permit any additional deck or patio extension into that area.
So I would move that the recommendation be amended to, so again, what is the page number? Because I need to look at the recommended motion. What is the page number of the?
51.
Thank you. So I would move that the motion say reduce the water course setback as measured from the natural boundary of the ocean from 15 meters to 6.5 meters to permit the development as proposed, not including the lower deck extension.
Not including the lower deck extension. Well, the motion could theoretically stand then, and we could consider that as an amendment.
Yeah, but I haven't got a seconder to that. Oh.
No, we have a motion on the floor, which is in its entirety. You've now added the words "not including the lower deck,"
Which is an amendment.
right? So let's consider if you can get a seconder for your amendment.
Fuller did.
Councillor Fuller is going to second the amendment. Okay. So on the amendment, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Question to staff. If we're not including the lower deck, do we need the development permit if the lower deck is not being permitted to be created?
Your Worship, the DP at that point would be primarily to legalize the siting of the existing structures, the house and the garage. And at this point, the DP is structured in such a way that in exchange for the compensation of legalizing those structures, there is the rehabilitation of the foreshore. So that would be primarily what the DP would achieve.
Yes, I get that. But my question is, if we remove the lower deck, the new deck, then we don't have a water course setback infraction, or do we?
If I follow your point, would be that the home and the garage are likely legal non-conforming at that point, and they could be repaired, maintained, but you couldn't do any additions to those buildings or structures. What they're looking for as part of this process was to legalize the siting of those structures, so they would no longer be legal non-conforming. If the DP was passed, they would just be simply legal in their siting.
Councillor Hong? No. Councillor Hong to the amendment.
Thank you. You know, just looking at this from Google Earth, this deck that we're calling is more or less a patio. Is that right, Mr. Lindsay? So whether you approve it or not, they can still go out in their grass. There's no fence line that's going to prevent them from going. So I'm just curious on what we can do or what. So if we don't approve this, they still have the right to go on their grass, walk out to the beach. Or we can say, hey, you could put a patio deck out there. Is that what we're discussing?
So the amendment, Councillor Hong, is the wording not including the lower deck. So you're allowing everything else, but not including that lower deck.
Well, I just want clarification on what that lower deck is.
To Lindsay.
Your Worship, my understanding is it's an at-grade patio or deck space. So any kind of development in the watercourse setback areas require a development permit. So without a development permit, it wouldn't technically have the ability to obtain a building permit to build a deck or do any kind of disturbance in there to create additional hard surface landscaping.
But seeing on this, it doesn't look like it's going to take away from anything that they don't already use or they don't already have, or they're going to impact anything. I don't see them tearing down trees, or it's going to be in the way of animals, rocks, shrubs, or anything. It just looks like it's a piece of their property that could be used. And I understand protecting the setback, but just looking at all the other houses around it, especially the one next to it and that dock, that seems to have a lot more impact on the environment than this person asking to put a ground patio on. That's my question. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Kipp on the amendment.
Well, just from my point, this picture that's on the screen now, I think it's page 58 on our agenda. You can see the dotted line for the 15-meter setback. So they do need, where the garage is, they need the variance to be signed off, and they need a corner of their house and the existing second floor deck Personally, I don't have a problem. I actually looked at the site, and it's already cleared. It's open. It's there now, so I don't have a concern with this setback. That's why I'm not in favor of the amendment.
Okay, not in favor. Councillor Yocum.
Thank you. Just quickly, after hearing, looking at the picture and Councillor Hong's speaking, they're not harming nothing. These people are investing their own dime. I definitely won't be supporting the amendment and support the original staff's original recommendation here. Thank you.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I also don't have a problem with the original recommendation, and if we did support the amendment, I understand the implications of that, but if we did, then I would hope the owners would have the opportunity to come forward at a future date and put forward their argument for the lower deck. But I'm quite happy to support the original recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to call the question on the amendment. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, just wanted to speak to this. This is, to me, this is very important because this was the subject of a year-long discussion with our environmental committee and the environmental organizations in town. And what we made very clear in that committee and in that final report and in the policy is that the very first thing you do when you're looking at development that requires a setback from the riparian piece, that the very first thing you do is work on ways not to do that, because that's how highly we value our waterfront. That's how highly we value the land that borders our rivers, our streams, and our ocean. So that's why, for me, that's a very important issue. That's why, for me, having an environmental committee was a very important committee that advised us. They told us, that committee made up of our community told us this is of utmost importance to us. So I'm just honoring the intent of that committee, and so I can't support it.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to call a question on the amendment. The amendment is to add the words at the end of the recommendation, not including lower deck. All those in favor of the amendment? Councillor Brennan. All those opposed? Councillors Hong, Yocum, Bestwick, Mayor McKay, Thorpe, Fuller, and Kipp opposed. Motion fails. So now to the original recommendation and the original motion.
So move that council approve DP. Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay. So on the original one, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion passes. Next item, development permit number DP 1031 at 3200 Singleton Road. And the purpose is to present council's consideration a development permit application to vary the watercourse setback at 3200 Singleton Road to legalize the siting of an existing house and deck. There's a recommendation on page 65. We have a mover for the recommendation. Councillor Hong, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Show Councillor Brennan opposed. Motion passes. Development permit number 1039 at 1650 College Drive. The purpose is to present council's consideration a development permit application to allow a reduction in the watercourse setback in order to increase the buildable area within a proposed subdivision. And there's a recommendation on page 74. Move the recommendation. Thank you, Councillor Bestwick, and seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I'm not going to support this one because it's simply to extend the developable area of the property. To me, the property looks like it's got a heck of a lot of development potential as it is, and so I won't support this one. I believe at times the last one you support it because of existing buildings. They're already breaching the riparian setbacks. I get that. This one doesn't. This one, to me, seems simply, let's ask for a riparian variance so I can make some more money on development. And there's lots of developable property right here, as it is. So, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. It's challenging for me when there's, I understand completely when there's a building existing and or for a deck purpose or otherwise, but when we're talking about densification of and watercourse setbacks to include 7, this is 7, Mr. Lindsay, this is 7 lot subdivision with accessory buildings, meaning granny suites or whatever you want to refer to them as, so 14 dwellings on that site?
Sorry, Your Worship, just to clarify on that, there's a number of the properties which are large enough which would allow for detached suites. All of the lots would be large enough to at least have secondary suites. So some of them may be internal, for example, but there is at least 3, 4 of the 7 that would be large enough for detached suites, yes.
So, thank you. So does the report suggest that all of the lots upon subdivision would have secondary suites in either, I mean, how do you know if they're inside the unit or a separate building? How do you know?
It's based on the lot size, Your Worship. So based on my quick review, it looks like there's at least 5 of the parcels which would be eligible for detached secondary suites in detached buildings. All of them would be eligible for suites.
Thank you.
All right, seeing no further questions, we're going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Shows Councillor Fuller, Brennan, and Bestwick opposed. Motion carries. Next item, Development Variance Permit, DVP 305, DVP 304 at 5190 Lone Links Lane. And this is to present for Council's consideration a development variance permit to allow the construction of a single residential dwelling with variances to the maximum building height and maximum perimeter wall height at 5190 Lone Links Lane. And it's requested that Council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 304. Is there anyone wishing to speak to Development Variance Permit 304 for the second time? And for the third and final time. Seeing none, there's a recommendation on page 85. Move the recommendation and seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion. Councillor Kipp.
Thank you. I just wanted to declare something on this piece of property. A couple of years ago, I declared a conflict of interest on this land, but it was with a different development and a different situation, and it has no attachment to this proposal at this property. So I just wanted to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next one is Development Variance Permit.
Your Worship, I have a conflict of interest on this project, 4155 Jingle Pot Road, that I've been involved in the designing, so I'm stepping out of the room.
Notice to your style.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Kipp. So, Development Variance Permit number DVP 305 at 4155 Jingle Pot Road. And the purpose is to prevent for Council's consideration a development variance permit application to construct an oversized accessory building at 4155 Jingle Pot Road. And it's requested that Council hear anyone wishing to speak with respect to DVP 305. Is there anyone wishing to speak to DVP 305? For the second time, DVP 305. And for the third and final time, DVP 305 at 4155 Jingle Pot Road. Seeing none? Thank you. Moved by Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Bestwick. Discussion. Councillor Kipp is gone. Okay, thank you. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. The next item is Official Community Plan Amendment Application OCP 8282 at rezoning application, and that is RA 371 at 2020 Estevan Road. And the purpose is to present for Council's consideration an official community plan amendment application to amend the land use designation within the official community plan from neighborhood to corridor, and the land use designation in the Brecon Newcastle Neighborhood Plan from neighborhood to mixed-use corridor, and to concurrently rezone the subject property from Community Service 1, or CS1, to mixed-use corridor, COR2, to develop a 5-story mixed-use building which will include a church space and multifamily residential building consisting of both market rental and affordable rental units. There are a number of recommendations listed from 1 to 5. Move 1 through 5. Seconded by Councillor Fuller. Discussion. Councillor Bestwick.
Thank you. While I like it, we'll be supporting it, approve of it, per se. Always, in this particular case, parking, if there's mixed residential and a new church to be constructed and other developments on site, I'm just curious of how parking will be addressed to accommodate on what is the beginning of Spaghetti Junction, if you will, and how we're going to accommodate the required or necessary parking needs on this very busy Brecon Hill.
Before you answer that, I'm just going to suggest that we can't do them all together. There are a number of first and second readings here, so we'll have to do them one at a time. So we'll consider this, with Council's consent, a review of motion, the first motion, that the Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2017 6500-34 to redesignate from neighborhood to corridor and redesignate 2020 SVN Road on the neighborhood land use map from neighborhood to mixed use corridor. So we'll be dealing with that one the first time around. Sorry, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I guess I'd want to stress that we have a concept plan that's on page 113 in your agenda, which gives you kind of a site plan. Again, we're at the rezoning OCP stage. If they're ultimately proceed with development, they'll need to come forward with the development permit, at which point any kind of parking variance would be requested and ultimately considered by council at that time. What I can say in this conceptual plan that they've put together for rezoning is they're actually proposing 98 parking stalls on the property, 89 of them proposed underground or under the building, and the remaining 9 surface parking spaces. That is basically 1 parking stall for each residential unit in the building and 24 parking stalls for the church. That would be a variance request from our standard 1.66 per dwelling unit down to 1, but again, that's a consideration we'd be asking of council to make if this application comes forward in this form at the development permit stage.
If I just might have a follow-up, please. So, as I stated, I'm in favor of the development of this property, but when we're talking 74 multifamily rental units on that site, as well as a church replacement. And that's great that there's going to be 80 plus parking stalls underground and 9 surface. It seems 20 for the church itself seems a little bit shy, but I guess, as you say, we'll have more opportunities once we get there if this is in fact what the design comes back. But I would have no reason to believe that this isn't what we would be dealing with upon approving it tonight. So it would make sense to me that with 74 multi-units on that particular corner, it's a challenging traffic, congested, with a school across the way and the ferries unloading and so on and so forth. But it'll be interesting to watch this development unfold. I'll support it.
Mr. Lindsay, there will be a requirement for rationale for their parking strategy, will there not?
Absolutely, Your Worship. And they've actually done a traffic impact assessment, including a parking analysis, which is included and attached to your report this evening. But they'll be very much bringing that back and highlighting it as part of any kind of variance request. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Mr. Lindsay, I'll be supporting the project, but the question I have will be, did I hear a church will still reside there? There'll be a church still present on the site?
That's correct. Their current proposal is to have approximately a 75-seat church within that building, yes.
So what will with the mixed use, what will the, right now, because of the church and being singular, a church only there, what will the tax grant be? Will it be tax exemption still?
No, at that point, especially when half of the project is anticipated to be market rental, it would, that's a good point.
So will we create a tax
It would be taxed
base?
at commercial rates, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I'm going to support this. I really like the idea of that mix of housing, you know, market and affordable housing. So I think that's important to provide that mix. And hopefully as we move forward in other areas of the city, we'll look at that mix of housing as opposed to either just affordable housing or just market-based. So I really like the proposal, and when the parking thing comes up, we'll deal with it.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I like the proposal as well. I like the concept, and I will support the recommendation. Mr. Lindsay has answered my questions, I believe, and I will look forward to future debate about the size of the project, the parking, the traffic, and all of those things. But basically, I think this is a great move, and as I say, I like the concept, and I applaud the church for their forward-looking vision in this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm also going to support it at every level. This is absolute need in Nanaimo for particularly non-market housing. So I'm going to support it. Councillor Bestwick, can you read out the motions, please, as the bylaw? There are bylaws amendments.
Your worship? No.
Page 5. Oh.
Sorry, just you've already moved and seconded number 1.
Oh, thank you very much.
And you read that one out. So now if we could have a vote on that, then if Councillor Bestwick.
Call the question. Opposed? All right, motion passes. Next one.
Number 2, Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 6500.034, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 4500.106, RA 371, to rezone 2020 Estevan Road from Community Service 1, CS 1, to Mixed Use Corridor, CO Core 2, pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. Discussion, seeing none, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
The Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2017, 4500.106, pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And finally, that council direct staff to secure the community contribution prior to adoption of Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2017, 4500.106. Should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hong. Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, rezoning application at 3598 Norwell Drive. And the purpose is to present council with an application to rezone 3598 Norwell Drive from single dwelling residential R1 to row house residential R7 to permit a 10-unit row housing development. Can we have, Councillor Bestwick, can you move the motion to get on the floor for first reading?
Certainly. That Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2017, number 4500.105, RA 373, to rezone 3598 Norwell Drive from single-family dwelling residential to row housing residential R7, pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2017, 4500.105, pass second reading.
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that council direct staff to secure a covenant for the community contribution, road dedication, road cross-sections with offset sidewalk, and street trees prior to adoption of the bylaw. Should council support the bylaw at third reading?
Moved and seconded. Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, rezoning application number RA 375 at 5264 Sherbourne Drive. And the purpose is to present council with a rezoning application to rezone a portion of 5264 Sherbourne Drive from single dwelling residential R1 to duplex residential R4 to permit the construction of a duplex.
I would so move that zoning amendment bylaw 2017-4500.107 RA 375 to rezone 5264 Sherbourne Drive from single-family residential to duplex residential pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hahn. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
That zoning amendment bylaw 2017 number 4500.107 pass second reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hahn. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.
And that council direct staff to secure the community contribution prior to the adoption of the bylaw should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded by Councillor Hahn. Thank you. Discussion. Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, 15 Front Street, acceptance of project under revitalization tax exemption bylaw 2011, number 7143. And the purpose is to obtain council approval for a proposed hotel at 15 Front Street to be included under the revitalization tax exemption bylaw number 2011, number 7143.
I would so move that council approve the revitalization tax exemption agreement for a proposed 6-story hotel at 15 Front Street.
Moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next item. Teen Fest. And the purpose is to provide information related to the request for a Teen Fest event in Nanaimo. And can we get somebody to move the recommendation, please?
Across from the...
Move the staff recommendation by Councillor Hong, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Discussion. Councillor Beswick? No, thank you. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Advisory Committee minutes. First off, Finance and Audit Committee meeting held 2017, February 08. Nanaimo Youth Advisory Council meeting, November 16. Nanaimo Youth Advisory Council meeting held November 30th. We can do them all together. Moved by Councillor Beswick, seconded by Councillor Thorpe. Thank you. Any errors or omissions? Discussion? Seeing none, call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's no bylaws. And we've got an item under other business. That would be mine.
Yeah, it's Mr. Kevin Shaw, I believe, under other business.
He's under core review, is he not?
Oh, yes, he is. You're right. Sorry, Your Worship. I think it's you then.
Okay. That's correct. Council. As per the Council spending and amenities policy, I'm asking for Council approval to attend the following events. Number 1, C-SPAN commissioning of the 2 new truck ferries, the C-SPAN Swift and the C-SPAN Reliant in Delta this Sunday, April the 9th. There's more. Expected expense is $200. BC Economic Summit, June 11 to 13th, held in Victoria. This is a 3-day conference on economic development. I provide the following comment from our staff, which says it would be nice to have our mayor attend, as other communities always have the mayor and our council persons attend this conference. Often this conference is in Vancouver. This is the first time it's been on the island. I would expect potential costs with registration in a hotel to be estimated at $2,000. And the third is the BC Community Achievement Awards for April 26th to be held in Victoria. We have 3 recipients from Nanaimo, which include Mr. Roger Bird, Ms. Melanie Cadden, and Dr. Ralph Nielsen. And I would be pleased if other council members would come along. The total expenses expected for that event is $200. Motion to approve. Thank you. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion, Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Just on the second subject matter, the BC Economic Conference or otherwise, could the information that is presented there please come back for in a format of a report or information share on the subject matters that were provided?
Certainly.
That you feel are appropriate to Nanaimo?
Certainly, and our council spending and amenities policy requires that. Thank you. Councillor Yoakum.
Thank you. Just quickly on the item C, the third item, Is it blanket for those able to attend to honor those recipients from Nanaimo?
Absolutely, it's open.
And what was the date again? Sorry.
It's April 26th. It usually happens around 2 o'clock in the afternoon at Government House.
So Ms. Bauer will put out a notice for those that may be interested.
I can certainly do that, yes.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the next item. Core Services Report and Delegations. We have a delegation from Mr. Kevin Shaw.
Good evening, Kevin Shaw, Nanaimo, and I'm going to be flanked by property owners, business owners, merchants, and residents. This council and its administration are to be thanked for being proactive so far when it comes to reeling in taxpayer spending cited in the core review, the NEDC, VICC, and the DNBIA. This evening, we do ask you look into whether the DNBIA was dissolved correctly and assets given away correctly. It may be a nonprofit, but it is a body which much taxpayer money is flowed to, either through a tax levy collected by you, the city, then distributed by you, as well as $250,000 handed over from the pockets of all general taxpayers in the city of Nanaimo for 16 years, amounting to over $3 million, all given to the Downtown Nanaimo Business Improvement Association. At the dissolution vote of the association 2 weeks ago, many of us were shocked to receive only one vote. Some have been paying the extra BIA property tax for 30 years on 8 pieces of property. That's 8 extra tax levies, but only received one vote. What's an abuse of taxation without representation? Totally wrong. Full stop. Also, taxpayer assets were given away before the dissolution vote by the DNBIA board, before rank-and-file members who have been paying its keep even voted the final vote. And at that meeting, you, this council and city, were solely blamed by the DNBIA hierarchy for not consulting with it on the core review. That resulted in a chorus of boos from those of us in the audience. Your city manager has stated right here that staff has had at least a dozen talks with the BIA. And the BIA went on to state the remaining tax money, our tax and levy money, is likely going to flow into another group they are setting up to start again when the political climate in this city is better. Their words. Let me tell you straight up, everyone I have spoke to, many commercial property owners and residents do not want this group getting anywhere near our money again. We have seen very little to show. The 80% in favor dissolution vote was more so a non-confidence vote in the way our money has been spent. The good news, we property owners, merchants, and residents are stepping up to the plate more so on our own, forging ahead to do great things downtown on a grassroots, a truly volunteer, and a non-paid basis. The incorrect bemoaning from some alleging the DNBIA did so very much for downtown shows ignorance. Citizens are putting on Heritage Days now, and property owners and merchants, the Bathtub Days Street Fair. And for the first time in many years, it will encompass even more of the entire downtown. This city is to be thanked for the new light standards being put up, along with more hanging baskets and banners, core assets needed for a better community. And we are working more on security downtown to make Nanaimoites, all of Nanaimo, feel safe. This has not been the case under the DNBIA. We have asked openly at council before what this city is doing to protect our money and investments as taxpayers. You now must investigate what happened to our money, my money and assets that I have paid for as a taxpayer to the BIA. So you will all have a better oversight too, and understanding to never let mistakes happen again, particularly in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for the delegation? Seeing none, motion to receive the delegation. Moved by Councillor Bestwick, seconded by Councillor Hahn. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, sir.
We all thank you for your time. Thank you so much.
Councillor Kipp.
Thank you, Your Worship. Prior to the dissolution of the DMBA, the meeting that was planned, we'd asked for a council motion on what was going on with the dissolution. And I understand that staff feels there is some physical separation, but it is the money invested by the city. It is money that, and I do agree with Mr. Shaw that the commentary I heard from the meeting and that commentary that's come from the DMBA over the last while has been somewhat disturbing of what they were blaming and doing. And so I would like that we actually continue on that, what we asked for. We had a motion for it about did the dissolution take place properly? What has happened? I understand there's some $20,000 or $25,000 left in their account. What are they doing with that? The rules say they're supposed to donate it to someone of a like mind or a like society, and I want to see that that's being done. As I said in our core review, both the VICC and the DNBA, and I'll say the NEDC, have all had very similar concerns and complaints about productivity and things. So I really hope that we can continue along and ask and find out via questions to the DMBA, questions to the Societies Act of what has happened with their equipment and the money that's left over.
Mr. Mema.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the request is being worked on. We will make that follow-up. There's obviously concerns in terms of how the process went. We can easily do that. And we will advise council of what should have happened, what really happened, and if there is any next steps that need to be taken. I think the discouraging part with this is we without trying to defend anyone, we are on record, and I think the CAO was on record to state that the process of reviewing the funding to DNBIA was collaborative. We, through myself, actually asked the DNBIA to provide us with scenarios based on the recommendations coming out of the core service review that said if the city were to reduce funding by 50%, 75%, 100%, how would that look like? We received those scenarios back, and dissolution was not one of them. And to make it worse, the change that was made did not take away money from downtown. It basically changed the way that $116,000 was going to work. It was still going to be invested in downtown, except that it wasn't going to be funding salaries. It was going to have to fund events downtown. So that part is a little bit discouraging, but that's a position that the DNBIA has taken, which is fair. We will do the follow-up just in the interest of providing council with the facts as to what happened, what should have happened, and if there's any follow-up that needs to go. We are guided by, obviously, the fact that there's society, there's a board, there's a membership, there's votes that need to be taken and stuff like that. And we will come back with whatever we find.
Thank you. Councillor Beswick.
Thank you. Based on your comments, Mr. Mema, then I take that to mean that there hasn't been closure between the DNBIA and the city as it relates to any potential asset disposition or financial disposition?
Thank you, Your Worship. To the best of my knowledge, there hasn't been any correspondence back to say this is what happened. Yes, we did see the advertisement about the AGM. We did learn from the media about the votes and the dissolution and what happened or allegedly happened to the funds that are remaining. I would expect that the city being a partner in the funding, the city would have received either some accounting of this is what happened. in respect with the bylaws for that society that says, well, at dissolution you would send money to an organization of similar activities. Just a simple accounting of that would have been, I think, adequate, that we haven't received that.
Just another quick question, if I may. Who will undertake take the next necessary steps to determine whether or not there was or it was done properly or improperly or so on and so forth? Who undertakes that?
I think the process we're hoping is going to be collaborative. Really, it's a question of asking questions and validating the responses that come back. I don't think we're at a point where we should be requiring an audit or a forensic audit of some sort. It will be difficult, I think, to get to that stage, but I don't think we're at that stage yet. So we'll start off by, as a partner, the city has that right to know how this happened, and the accounting of remaining funds, given that the city was contributing to that fund.
Councillor Fuller.
Yeah, I have some grave concerns over the whole way that this was handled. A basic perusal of the Society Act states that everything they did was wrong. It was against the Societies Act. Now, that being said, 2 members can dissolve a society by filling out a piece of paper and sending it down to the society's people, and they don't even check to make sure that things are appropriate. They just automatically dissolve it upon those 2 members' signatures. Seen it done to a neighborhood group here in Nanaimo, and they had to fight long and hard to get that neighborhood group back. The city contributed a lot of money to the DNBIA over the years, and I don't think there's any way you could determine what monies of theirs were spent on certain things and what monies of ours were spent on certain things. I don't know if we can determine that or not. You mentioned we're not at a point where a forensic audit would be called for. And, I might agree with you on that one, but I would like to know when we will be, because this needs to be looked into. It needs to be looked into deeply. If there's money left over and that society is dissolved, that money should not be there. That money should have gone to, how do they call it? Like organization or a qualified recipient specified in the bylaws of the society. When a society dissolves, it doesn't usually keep money back, so it can start over again. If it wants to start over again, it goes out and sets up a recruitment process and so on and so forth. So I really think this has to be looked into carefully, deeply. I'm extremely disappointed in the efforts we made with the DNBIA and their response to those efforts.
Good. Councillor Brennan.
Yeah, I would just ask us to be somewhat circumspect with the language that we use. This is being broadcast, and when we use some of the language that was used tonight by our council and also by the delegation, I think we need to I just think we need to be more circumspect, because we're casting aspersions upon an organization and the people that worked there. And I don't want to see the city be the subject of any legal actions because of things that were said here. So forensic audit means much more than an audit. And it's words like that I'm referring to. We have absolutely no reason to call, as Mr. Mema said, we have no reason to call for a forensic audit at this point. And I would really caution us to be more careful about how we talk about the people in this city who provide services to us and to our citizens.
Thank you. Councillor Fuller.
Could I ask you guys if you were offended by my request for a
Councillor, you're out of
forensic
order.
audit?
Councillor. So, thank you very much. Next item. Question period. Seeing none, call for a motion to adjourn. Just a moment. Ms. Gurry.
You're correct. You're correct,
Thank you.
Your Worship, to adjourn, and then we're
Motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Hong. I'll call Councillor Kipp for a seconder. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Can we go in to our meeting that was recessed?